the Welsh people of that time, of the Middle Ages, understanding that they were just one part in an enormous clan structure, because it's important who you related to legally. They would see themselves as being just one link in the transmission of culture from the past into the future. They understood themselves to be living in a world full of magic and of unseen and disembodied intelligences, be that saints or the ancient gods that were still remembered. They remembered the tales of their ancestors, be that Arthur, or Gawain, or Llyr, or Bran. They remember these. And it's a way of looking at the world, of understanding yourself, that is completely different to how we are consuming manufactured mass media and living in atomized, individualistic societies.
Hello, and welcome to episode 168 of Toward a Better Life. This is your host, Kevin Pennell. And thanks ever so much for tuning in to the episode, listeners. Regardless of where in the world you might find yourself, our lives do they do help to flow more with a natural rhythm, a flow with the life to ultimately aim toward balance. Now, this is the timeless message of Toward a Better Life, going with the flow in the rhythm of life. That's also performed through implementing balance, harmony, compassion, kindness into our lives, personally, culturally, and spiritually. This all begins with each one of us as individuals, and I'd like to share these concepts on the podcast from around the world. And we are going to go to the other side of the world for this episode. We're seeking others of the same spirit, heart, and mind through the application of the many insights and teachings from the episodes. We can become better souls, better spirits, and true human beings that continue a journey to wholeness and harmony, not only for ourselves, but for the generations yet to come. I also offer you the opportunity to share your prose, your music, your poetry, your storytelling, your books, and as a matter of fact, we're going to be doing that today. So stay tuned. Please subscribe to the program if you haven't done so already through your favorite podcast platform, like I always say, and do keep following for weekly magical insights into earth-based spirituality, self-development, and some self-care. Also, remember to support the program by leaving a review in Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you might be using. It only takes a minute to leave that review. Do visit the website, towardabetterlife.com, where you can contact me to learn more about a free discovery call to help you on your own journey toward a better life, along with some prior episodes, learning opportunities, and services that I offer outside the podcast. And there are just contact me forms there. If you've got any questions about that, when you go to the website, just click on it and send me a note. And you also have a few accessories there on the site to assist you on your journey. Contact me through my website or send inquiries to Kevin at towardabetterlife.com. Stories of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, King Arthur, the Magic of Wales, and so many more tales full of honor, romance, and magic from the Middle Ages captivate us when we read or we listen to their stories. Personally, I really do enjoy the historical fictions, and you may have figured that out by now. Well, these same stories weave tapestries of wonder that can influence our lives to learn how to be better humans as part of the natural world. Now, we're not trying to bring that culture forward, but we're honoring the essence of what was being taught in those times. Now, one man's quest has led him to write his findings as he searches the lands of old and researches those cultures. We're privileged to sit and listen to some of what he has written about in this episode. Emlyn Phillips is this week's guest, who hails from Wales, and he considers himself a global nomad. He's a druid-grade member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and Emlyn has degrees in international relations, computer science, business administration, as well as postgraduate qualifications in applied linguistics. He's also a trained coach, hypnotherapist, and mediator, and he has worked as an outdoor pursuits instructor, a Linux system administrator, developer of multilingual online learning systems. and a corporate coach, university lecturer in strategic management and marketing, and an educator and examiner in English as a second language. He's the author of numerous published articles and of 2 books, with a third on its way. He currently lives in the small tropical nation of Timor-Leste, and Emlyn is also very, very passionate, to say the least, in his studies of Wales and his heritage. Its history there, its culture, and the magical mysteries of old from that region. Please welcome Emlyn Phillips as we chat about the magic and mysteries of Wales in this episode of Toward a Better Life. I'm happy to welcome Emlyn Phillips to the program today. Emlyn, how are you and where are you located?
Good morning, bon dia. I'm currently in Timor-Leste, which is half of a small island between Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and not that far from Darwin in Australia.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Emlyn in the sense that Emlyn is of the Druid order with the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and I'd like him to share a little bit about his story and his journey on Druidry. And I would just begin, Emlyn, by saying, how did you begin with Druidry, and what was your path in leading to that? Was it like in a family arrangement that you always had this, or how did it begin for you?
No, I mean, I was raised in a family that was Anglican, which I think in the States you call Episcopalian.
Sure. Yeah.
But there wasn't much passion in it. There's no magic there, and it never really gripped me. So I didn't get any interest in that. I forget how it was when I was an undergraduate. I started reading a bit about Wicca. That was in the 90s. Of course, it was very widespread then, quite high profile, and sort of dabbled with that. But I think then, yeah, I gradually got more interested in Taoism, and that was really where my interest lay. And life conspired to take me out to Asia. I went to Singapore, so I was studying Taoism there. Got much more interested in Buddhism, which in the sort of the Chinese cultural mindsets, are entirely compatible with each other. You don't have to be one or the other. So I spent a good few years really going down that road. But during the 90s, when I was reading about Wicca, I'd become aware of Druidry and of Obod. I read books by Philip Carr-Gomm, and back then it seemed a little bit more staid and not really what I was looking for. But as I got older, I started to read more, got interested, and I think my father died while I was out in Asia, and that kind of prompted me to say, okay, do you know what? I'm actually going to start investigating this spiritual path. So I wrote off and I joined Obod, and they were sending the Gwersi, the lessons to me through the mail to China and Beijing, where I was living then. And I went through the Bardic grade, and then with COVID, I went back to Wales and got through the Ovate grade, and then joined the Druid grade. But that's currently on hold because life brought me out to Timor-Leste.
Okay. All right. And you said that one of the things, of course, the difference that you noted from the Anglican standpoint is pretty much lack of magic, and I get that. It's more a matter of things being, well, like we talk about sometimes. It's dogmatic, and you just kind of go along through life and so forth, and this is what we're supposed to do, and it just kind of leaves a little bit to desire when we want to connect with the natural world. Have you always had that connection as far as with the natural world a little bit?
Very much. When I was a child, I was always out in nature. I'm from the generation where we were still permitted to run around unsupervised,
Yeah.
and go where we fancied. So I spent a lot of time in nature, just watching it, and that without any doubt shaped my views. I mean, I can still remember that just around the corner from the family home, there was actually an old ruined Norman castle.
Mm.
and it was thoroughly overgrown, overlooked a valley, and at night, you could hear the owls hunting in the valley below you. I had some quite, yeah, druidic experiences there, though it was only later that I sort of realized that was what was happening. And as I mentioned to you before we went live, the town where I grew up, Cowbridge in Glamorgan, it's pretty much the town where Iolo Morgannwg was based. He lived
Mm.
in a village a little bit outside, but
Mm.
Iolo, of course, is the sort of conceptual heart of modern Druidry. And so I grew up walking around the same lanes that he walked,
Mm.
going through the little hamlets and villages where he walked through. So I wonder if that had some effect on me, but you know,
Probably, probably.
probably.
I know one of the things that attracted me for to get together with you is you have a wonderful blog or email list or whatever it may be. I know this. I first saw it in our group at OBOD, and then I noticed that you also have regular input, and your focus is a lot on the history of Wales, and we think about things like one of the things that comes to mind right off is Gawain. And what prompted you to move that direction? Because the information that you've got there is phenomenal. You've done a lot of research, it seems like.
Um, well, I think let me backtrack a little bit,
Sure.
because during COVID, basically we were all trapped in our homes, and I got curious about some things in Iolo Morgannwg's life, and that suddenly turned into a book. And I felt very much that the book chose me as its way into the world.
Mhm.
I would be doing research. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and realize I had an idea that I had to write. I'd rush to my computer. I'd still be typing there 8 hours later.
Yeah.
And so that led to me sort of self-publishing a book on aspects of John McGann's life. And that got me thinking that I might be able to do something with words. I entered a competition for a literary magazine in Wales and won that.
Hmm.
I started writing columns for an online magazine, Bylines Cymru. That became my second book when I compiled a collection of my essays. And then I'd come out. There's a long story here. I spent a number of years unexpectedly sort of having to take care of or look after the interests of an elderly relative, which sort of brought my own life to a halt.
Hmm.
And by 2023, I was managing to get that all sorted out so I did not need to be involved anymore. But all of the aspirations I'd had when I came back to Wales from China had sort of been blocked by then. And I just didn't see any future. I was really wondering what was happening with my life and where I was going. Did I have any future? Couldn't find any work. And I just thought I need to get out on the road. I need
Hmm.
to experience nature and sort of immerse myself in it again. And I wanted to get out on the road and walk. And around that time, I'd seen I think it was 2021, the film came out, The Green Knight, uh, um, which some of your listeners may have heard of. And it was the first time I'd really been exposed to the story of Sir Gawain and his quest for the Green Knight. And if you aren't familiar with it, it's a tale that dates from the late 13th century.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, Arthur and his knights are at Camelot at Christmas. Arthur says, as is his custom, he won't eat until he's heard of a wonder. And with that, the doors to his court are thrown open, and in rides a, a knight. He's entirely green, his hair's green, his skin is green, his clothes are green, his horse is green. And he offers a challenge. He says, whichever knight dares accept my game, he may strike me any blow he likes with my axe, and in return, he shall receive the same blow 1 year and 1 day from now. So Gawain accepts the challenge. The knight kneels down, and Gawain cuts his head off. Uh, And then he goes out on the road to find the knight a year and a day later. And I realized when I was reading this, and I got fascinated by the story, I started researching its background, and I realized it comes from the Welsh Marches. It mentions North Wales specifically as a part of Gawain's journey. And I thought, let's dive a bit deeper into this. And I did more research, and I thought I could identify the path that Gawain took. And I set out to walk as much of it as I could. So it took me from Pembrokeshire in southwest Wales through the mountains of mid Wales into northeast Wales, and from there, scholars have identified that the Green Knight's home, or the Green Chapel, that was in the Peak District in northern England. So that was it. I just thought, personally, I needed to get out and try to discover, was there any enchantment left in the land? I wanted to follow the story, and as I went along my journey, my pilgrimage, if you like, I started reading about the myths and the history and the legend associated with the places I went through, and just went deeper and deeper and deeper because there were so many layers, there was so much richness there, and that is what's going into my Substack, which is Traethiad, Traethiad. It's a Welsh word meaning it can mean the predicate in grammatical terms. It's the part of the sentence that describes the subject, or it can mean an account or a narrative. So it works pretty well.
I know that I've seen some recent information, and I apologize that I don't remember his name right now, but it was in social media, and he's a historian who's doing a lot of work on Arthur. And it seems that they have found a tour, maybe, or something, where they believe that it's quite possible that, for one thing, it could be where Merlin was buried. And there's a lot of really interesting historical information out there, and we hear stories about Gawain and things like that, and people like that, I should say. And what fascinates me so much with this, Emlyn, is that we are able to actually witness some of this that we have been told, oh, that's just myth. Those people never really existed. And I think that's the part that is intriguing to me, is with folks like yourself and folks like the other gentleman whose name just misses me for the moment. You're doing some real work and being able to show, yes, these people really did exist. And yes, some stories are going to be made up about them. And yet there's enough information out there to say they really were around, and they really did live lives, and it wasn't just myth. And that's, to me, that's really fascinating. So when did you begin the process of your research with this? I know you mentioned about around 2023 and COVID and things like that, and so forth, when you're in Wales. But is that when it started in the 2020s, or when did it start for you?
Well, I'm a passionate Welshman. I'm fascinated by my own nation's culture and language. And that's been a lifelong effort for me.
Okay.
I was mentioning to you before we went live that my father's parents both spoke Welsh.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was a late child, so both of my grandparents were born in 1900.
Mm-hmm.
So an entirely different world back then.
Yeah.
But they had been influenced, I think, by um, the attitudes in that day where the Welsh language was looked down upon. It was discouraged. Parents were, encouraged not to pass it on to their children because the language of progress was English. And I think that's probably what happened in my own family. So I traveled a bit when I was younger. I did a year out between school and university in Southern Africa. And I met a lot of people, and when I told them I came from Wales, they said, "Do you speak Welsh?" And I always had to say, "No, I don't." And I wound up learning it in my 20s. I went on an intensive course. I took steps to get work in a Welsh-speaking area, and became fairly fluent at that time. But it meant that I really started digging into what does it mean to be Welsh? Who am I? Where are my people from? What
Mm.
are the stories that I was not taught in school? Because when I was at school, we were taught about the ancient Greeks and then the Romans, and then suddenly there was a big jump until we were being taught about the Anglo-Saxons, and it's like, well, what happened to the Welsh and the people who were here before the Saxons arrived? And we were taught nothing about that, and so I had to learn my history and start learning about our traditions and our myths almost from scratch. And so it started really, I guess, in my 20s. So we're talking quite a while ago now. And I've been learning ever since. And so all the layers of that and the various things that I've taken an interest in over the years kind of materialized as layers and elements of what I'm exploring and learning about now.
So,
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go on, go on.
The thing that I'm looking at here at the moment is, and I you mentioned about it earlier on when we first started talking about it, but you had an entry here from, I guess it was February 1st. It was that I got 2/1/26. So the death of Wayne Glendoir, is that what you're referring to, and how uh, the seer, I'm just going to read it. The seer foresaw that death under a black banner, and you explored his last year, his links with warrior monks, and the worldview that produced the Mabinogi, and the tale of Gawain and the Green Knight. So I would like to become more familiar as an individual with, for an example, the Mabinogi. I got my book on the Mabinogi, one of the many that are that are out there and available. But
Sure.
it's a fascinating thing to me that it kind of goes along the lines of what can I learn to be a better person by looking at the lives that are being portrayed here. What is some of the spiritual significance that I'm seeing? And that's another part that's interesting to me is what we can glean from, I'll say it, from our ancestors in how to live a better life. We have all this technology around us, and yet I just don't feel that the vibrancy is as good as it could be. And when I read information that you have, it seems like there is that proverbial light that you can see, that there are things that we can learn from these and from the lives of others. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, that good. That's a kind of deep question there,
Yeah,
Kevin.
yeah, yeah. We'll take little pieces of it. It's like eating an
Yeah,
elephant, Emlyn,
okay.
just one little bite at a time. So
All right.
let's look at it and say what do you see that we can glean from looking at some of the history and looking at some of the ancestry? I mean, obviously, it's affected your life, and are there things that we can do, that maybe listeners can do to look back and say what's different then from what it is now? Because we're still human beings. That was several hundred years ago, but we're still the same thing. And I think isn't it, in some of the biological work and so forth that's been done, that says humans as we know them, as we are right now, haven't really changed in tens of thousands of years. So what's different from us now versus what we were 5, 6, 700 years ago, and what can we glean from that? What can you glean from that, do you suppose?
That I think is the core question of what I've been exploring. You are right to say that biologically humans haven't changed. Okay,
Mm,
gotcha. Um, but culturally,
yeah,
we are not the same.
no.
Um, and I'm involved in language education. I've got postgraduate qualifications in applied linguistics, and I looked a lot into the relationship between language, culture, and thought. I've had experience of hypnotherapy. I'm a trained hypnotherapist myself, so I'm very well aware that words alone can change not just your mind, but because the mind and the body are integrated systems,
Mm-hmm.
change the mind and you can change the body.
Right.
And we're still learning about how all of this works, but the importance there is that culture and language shape the way we experience the world around us.
Yes.
Um, and I think over the last 100 years, 200 years, globally, our cultural filters have become more homogenized because we're exposed to the same media. But if you go back before mass media, then every culture perceived the world in very different ways, depending on what was important. I mean, that's just survival, that's evolution, that's how cultures become different in different environments. So if we want to understand what the tales of the Mabinogi, the tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, all of these things that have been passed down to us, it's not enough to just read the words. In a way, what I wanted to start exploring was how did the audience they were written for interpret them?
Mm.
And when you go that way, things change quite a lot. So if well, I realised that the poem Gawain and the Green Knight was written, as I said, in the late 13th century. So you're talking, 14th century, so the late 1300s. And the time and the place overlapped very significantly with the culture of the Welsh Marches, which is the sort of disputed and debated lands between Wales and England at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big figures, the outstanding figure for the Welsh then, was a man named Owen Glyndwr, who was the heir to three of the ancient Welsh kingdoms. And so I thought, okay, let's look at the poems through his eyes. And then I discovered that the Mabinogi, in the form that we have them today, which come from the Red Book of Hergest, they were written down at precisely the same time. And that was done. People tend to talk about, monks writing down these ancient myths, but that's not what happened. There was a figure, a man called Hopkin ap Thomas Abenion, who was a landowner in South Wales in the Marcher Lordship of Gwir. And he commissioned that book, and it was a compilation of existing Welsh text covering everything from the ancient Welsh laws to poetry to the legends. It was a comprehensive collection of all aspects of Welsh culture at that time. And the interesting thing about Hopkin is we don't know much about him, but we do know that he was what was called a master of Brit. He was a master poet in his own right. And so that makes him a landowner. He's a poet. And some records that survive tell us he was also an accomplished soldier and a leader of soldiers in the field. So, a very broad talent range there. And in those days, the Pencerddi, the best poets, the master poets, they were expected to have mastered divination as well as poetry and as well as learning genealogy, because at that time, under Welsh law, justice was administered on a clan basis. So if you had a crime committed, then you had to pay a fee. There were no jails. And the fee, if the individual concerned could not pay it, it had to be paid by his kin. And therefore, who you were related to, it had legal implications. It was the kin system was the fundamental basis of society for Wales. So you have these people like Hopkyn ap Thomas, who shape the culture because they create new poetry. They maintain the culture because they are transmitting the poetry that came from beyond. They are interpreting their knowledge of human nature and their power of words to carry out acts of divination. And Owen Glyndŵr, who eventually rose in rebellion against English rule and tried to restore Welsh independence, he's associated with two pencerddi, sort of poet seers that we know of. One is only known by nickname, Crach a Finant, and I spent a little bit of time trying to work out who he was. But then the other was Hopkyn ap Thomas, who was consulted by Glyndŵr on military matters and forecast that if he went east, he would die under a black banner. Which led to another thing that surprised me as I was doing my research. I kept coming across the Knights Hospitaller. Now, most of your listeners probably have heard of the Templars in one way or another. And the Knights Templar were one society of warrior monks, crusader monks. The Hospitallers were another. By the time we're talking about, when Owen Glyndŵr and the poet who wrote the story of Gawain, and we don't know who that was. But so by the late 13th century, the Templars had been suppressed, and they've entered into folklore and Dan Brown and all of that. But the Hospitallers were still going, and they were all across Wales because their role was to provide protection and assistance to pilgrims. And we've got a number of holy sites in Wales where pilgrims were going, and they were being raided by these sort of lawless Welsh tribes. So that the Knights Hospitaller, these warrior monks, they were active in the Mediterranean, but they were also active in Wales. And I learned that they were associated with a number of miracles in Wales and the borders, where people had come back from the dead after being executed.
Wow.
And people just don't talk about this. And I'm going off on a tangent with those because there's so much to explore. But ultimately, to get back to your original question, what do we learn from the people of the past? That medieval mindset in which all of this was happening, it had a unified sense of the universe. And obviously at that time it was Christianized, but it was this sense of the universe, of the world being an integrated whole, of it all being an emanation of a divine vision, of which humans are only a part. We coexist with all of these other life forms that are also a part of the vision, and which may or may not overlap with our role. They had, in those days, an education system, and everybody who was educated would have gone through this, of the seven liberal arts, the trivium of logic and grammar and rhetoric, and then the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And all of these things were connected by numbers. And the system of numbers and of ratios was the model of the medieval worldview, expressed itself in symbolism. So the pentacle represented rebirth and the endless circle of life. And Sir Gawain, when he sets out on his quest to find this mysterious Green Knight, he has a red pentacle on his shield. It's it was a Christian symbol. But this system of an integrated universe and the liberal arts, they predate Christianity. They go back to the Greeks, but it was maintained from the time of the classical Greeks through the Roman Empire, and through the Romans it was transmitted into the early medieval period, and then it was still fundamental to education up until the 18th century, I think.
there are a few things that are rolling around in my head a little bit. Like one of the things is we're talking about a writing that you've referenced that basically are some things were written down around the 13th and 14th century, talking about Gawain. Gawain, of course, was back in what, the fourth or fifth century, fifth or sixth century, correct? Yeah,
The that yeah, it's a post-Roman period when these tales
yeah,
emerge.
yeah. And when you said that it was commissioned by the gentleman that you were mentioning earlier, was it Hopkin of Thomas that you said that
Hopkins
commissioned it?
Thomas,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, in your research that you've done for that,
Well, the thing is, you were talking about, oh, we find out about the past, but this research that I've read, and I can't remember the name of the academic, but this is solid academic work, saying essentially there's three cultures in the world that have maintained cultural continuity for I think five, six, maybe more millennia.
mm,
So we're talking many, many, many thousands of years. One of them is the indigenous peoples of Australia.
yes,
Another is the Tamil culture of southern India,
okay,
um, whose stories and myths accurately date and talk about rises in sea levels when cities have been submerged and so on. And the third is the Celtic culture of Northwest Europe.
mm,
Um, we have the tales of drowned cities. In Wales we have Cantref y Gwaelod, the lost 100,
yeah,
and there are beaches where you see prehistoric drowned forests. So the memory of that land continues in our culture. You've got Lyonesse off Cornwall. You have Is off Brittany, and these we think now genuinely transmit the memory of lands that have now been lost to the sea. And when you get into researching medieval culture, you come to understand that, of course, in a pre-literate age, or when literacy was reserved to the few, memory was the main cultural vehicle, and people trained their memories in ways that most of us now find unbelievable.
hmm,
But if you look at some of the medieval texts, there were ways of doing this. And the bards of Wales and Ireland would memorize hundreds and thousands of words and stories and tales and pass them on. So you have this system, which probably goes back to the days of the original Druids, of training the memory to communicate and transmit culture. And people with that degree of talent and skill and ability in remembering things remember it and they pass it on, and so there's an accurate, of course it changes over time because the world changes, the
sure.
environment changes, the challenges changes, you have to reinterpret these things.
But
And so this is how the memory of real people become archetypes and heroic figures that you can relate to the challenges and needs of your own time and your own life. But the cultural transmission was in depth and very accurate. And the reason I mention Hopkin ap Thomas as well is he was one of these bards. He'd been trained in these techniques and he knew the story. But he also lived through the Black Plague, the Black Death, which of course wiped out huge numbers of people in Northern Europe. And I speculate, we can't know, but I'm speculating that he would have known or known of bards who had these treasure troves of inherited tales and seen them wiped out, probably seen numerous bards killed by the plague, and he understood. We've never seen anything like this before. This is putting our culture at risk.
hmm,
And so he commissioned scribes to write down all of these tales, to commit them to paper, perhaps as a way of preserving them should something like the Black Death happen again.
hmm,
That's my guess. But so but then through the cultural changes, economic changes, the um, English determination to stamp out Welsh culture, it was the bards disappeared, and all we had left were the books.
Mm-hmm.
But then during the 18th and 19th centuries, and this is one reason why Iolo Morgannwg's contribution is so underrated. These books, they got eaten by mice. They were destroyed by mold. They were burned in, house fires. So the bards disappeared because their cultural niche disappeared with the Welsh gentry. And then the books that had been left behind, they succumbed to, time. And so Iolo Morgannwg and other scholars of his period made a huge effort to collect them and record them and copy them. So we've lost so much. We're down to these few books of the Mabinogi and the tales that came with it. But once upon a time, there was so much more, and there was this entire worldview. And I'm writing my final few chapters now, but for me, it's that sense of the Welsh people of that time of the Middle Ages, understanding that they were just one part in an enormous clan structure, because it was important who you related to legally. They would see themselves as being just one link in the transmission of culture from the past into the future. They understood themselves to be living in a world full of magic and of unseen and disembodied intelligences, be that saints or the ancient gods that were still remembered. They remembered the tales of their ancestors, be that Arthur or Gawain or Llyr or Bran. They remember these. And it's a way of looking at the world, of understanding yourself, that is completely different to how we are consuming manufactured mass media and living in atomized, individualistic societies. Over the years, the last 15 years of my life, really, one way or another, have been dominated by the need to look after elderly relatives. Now, in the UK, of course, we have socialized healthcare. It's essentially free. But I've seen the strain over that period of how what we once took for granted is no longer becoming possible. And my sense is that in a world that is becoming depleted of natural resources, in a world where the Western societies no longer have the wealth that enabled us to live so well, family is going to become much more important. We're going to go back to a time when you needed your family around you. And for a lot of us, myself included, that's going to be, well, it's not going to be happening.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not only the people that you referenced of the ones that have been around for thousands of years, but when I think about it, all the information that like you're referencing that was lost from mice, from fires, from all these things. And yet, isn't it interesting how, Emlyn, that a lot of the truths were maintained over the thousands of years, all through verbal transmission, and to be able to tap into some of that. I tend to wonder sometimes when I've done, and it's interesting, you and I have something else in common, that I'm a hypnotherapist myself, and you do some work in past life regression with people, and you go back all these many, many years, and you get them into a place where, uh, say what we will, but we're going back hundreds, maybe even thousands of years sometimes with these people that when you're talking with them in a past life thing, and you wonder about some of the truths that they're trying to share with us and where those truths are coming from. And I think there are certainly rays of truth that we can find that are still there. And we found it even historically at the early 18th century that a lot of the information that you certainly know now is in modern druidry. It's only been around since the 18th century. But isn't it interesting that we still have the writings like what you're finding that go back even further and are able to portray uh, what we would guess the druidry was like thousands of years ago? Because we have no real written record, but we have some elements that are still there that gives us enough information. And I think sometimes too about some of the exposure that I had with indigenous people of North America for some years, and how everything was shared by them verbally. And you had different rites, you had ceremony, you had celebrations, all kinds of things, and all of it was done verbally, and it was passed from person to person. And you touched on something a moment ago that really makes you wonder their memory. Emlyn, we've gotten so used to the idea that, oh, I need to find this out. So I'll just click, 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 go through Google and see what I can find and do my Google search. Well, you didn't have that 5,000 years ago. You had to go to a village elder who would be able to tell you what was needed at that given time. And granted, that elder was only concerned about the given area, and that area may have not been much larger than, I'm going to say, 10, 15, 20 square miles. And that was where he lived his lifetime or her lifetime. And now we look at going, well, like you and I were talking, thousands of miles apart, and we don't think a thing about it. But that was different. That was unique, and how that a lot of these truths that we hear through the stories, and I think that's the other piece that's so unique about what you're able to do in the work that you're doing, and be able to find these stories and be able to see how we can take. That's where I go back to the thing about learning the stories and applying the stories so that our lives can be different. Our lives can, I don't want to necessarily say, oh, we need to revert back, we need to reconstruct. No, we take the technology that we have, that's fine, but don't lose the essence of the truths that are there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to lose sight of that. And I think that's the exciting work that you're doing is you are sharing the information uh, through Substack, and we can glean information ourselves. And sometimes when we talk about even I'm going to say the simple process of storytelling, but what does storytelling really do? Storytelling tells a story. We all have a story, and those stories can have so many wonderful ramifications to it. I'm going off now. It's your turn.
Oh well, picking up to, this thing of people in the past living their lives in a patch of only a few miles. Yes, but also no. And this is something that I've uncovered while I've been writing my books, and it fascinates me. Um, that it's not that simple. Uh, if you're aware of Alexander the Great, obviously he took his armies and he marched eastwards through Persia. He reached what's now India, Afghanistan, and he set up colonies, city-states all along the way, populated by his veterans, his old soldiers. Um, so even in what's now Afghanistan, Punjab in northern India, Alexander left behind him Greek-speaking city-states.
Hmm.
And over the centuries that followed him, they, in many cases, became Buddhist. They adopted the religion that had emerged in that region. So if you think about it, that in itself is remarkable. Out in Afghanistan and northern India, you had cultures that spoke Greek that were inheritors of the ancient Greek knowledge, but they were also Buddhist. Whenever you see a statue of the Buddha, that's because of Alexander the Great's soldiers, because they took Greek statue techniques into a region where they hadn't been used before. So that's fascinating. But the point I'm getting to there is that these Afghan or Central Asian Greco-Buddhist states issued coinage, and this is, I think, what my dates 300 years before Christ. But those coins have been found in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody went to Central Asia and brought the coins back to Britain. If you fast forward into historical times, so Edward I of England, who conquered Wales, before he was doing that, he was crusading, and he was approached by an envoy who had been sent by the ruler of, I think it was Baghdad, who was a Mongol, who had, following the Mongol empires, and that ruler wanted to form a military alliance with England against the Mamelukes in Egypt.
Hmm.
And the envoy he sent was a Uyghur from what's now the far extent of China, and he was a Christian. He was the Bishop of Urumqi. So when we think about people living in that small patch of land, no, people were roaming across the whole extent of Eurasia, from Wales to Central Asia to China. Marco Polo wasn't the only one. There were quite a few people going around, mixing, sharing cultures, and the whole experience of the Silk Roads. So people and ideas and cultures were moving around. Even in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, written, like I said, the late 1300s, you're talking there about halls of the nobility being decorated with tapestries coming from Turkestan.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll share with your listeners, one of the things I point out, we talk about King Arthur and his court of Camelot.
Yeah.
And one of the questions people always ask is, where was Camelot?
Mm-hmm.
And so I put forward my theory, because the Arthurian legends of that time, this is before Malory and Le Morte d'Arthur, but at that time the ideas were drawn from Geoffrey of Monmouth, Chrétien de Troyes, all like that. And they're fairly clear that Arthur's main base, his main court, was in the town of Caerleon, the old Roman legion city in South Wales. But kings at that time, they moved around because they had to be able to personally check on what was happening in their domains. So my thesis is that Camelot was wherever the king was.
Mm-hmm. That makes
the reason
sense.
it's got its name, the reason it's got its name is because the most expensive material, fabric, that you could get at that time was silk. But the second most expensive, and supremely expensive, was made from the molted hair of Bactrian camels in Mongolia and Central Asia. So this camel hair was imported from Central Asia at huge expense along the Silk Road, made into robes and such like for the European nobility, and it was called camelin or Camelot. So where would you see huge amounts of Camelot being worn? You would see it at the royal court, where all the king and the aristocracy were. So this is my proposition, that Camelot is wherever the king was, and it's called Camelot because that's what they were wearing.
What a unique idea. That's phenomenal. That's really good to think about that, because
there was a massively expensive medieval fabric called Camelot. I didn't, until I just stumbled across it while I was digging for other things, but it's true. Camelin or Camelot.
Yeah.
Made from Mongolian camel hair.
Let me ask you this. What if people want to read more from you, what's the easiest way to do it in Substack? You already mentioned it, but just because we'll have the information in show notes, but can people just type in Emlyn Phillips and be able to find you on Substack, or what? Do you have a
Very
website
simply,
or?
so no. I have a much neglected website, which is which is tritheat.com.
Okay.
I'll let you know the address. And that sort of links to various blog posts there, to what I've written on Bylines Cymru, more about politics. Uh, yeah, so that's probably the first place to go.
And you're available to talk with people about this sort of thing too, from what you've mentioned, although you're kind of far away, but at the same token, you have the ability to share information with folks. Um, it,
Yes, for sure. Time differences and working commitments permitting, but yeah.
is it the easiest thing to do is get in touch with you through Substack and areas like that if they wanted to reach out to you?
I believe there's a functioning contact form on my website.
Okay.
So that's
All
probably
right.
best.
We'll make sure we put that in there. So I always like to ask people what they like to do to create a better life for themselves. And what would that be for you?
I would say, I mean, if I look back at my life, I hope there's much more of it to come, touch wood. But if I look back at my life, it's through being open to opportunities that arise, um, being
Okay.
open to creating opportunities. Don't let's not be stuck in who we are at this moment, or certainly let's not be stuck in who other people think we should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We are stories. We are constantly potentially creating our own narrative, our own tale of ourselves, and we benefit, I think, from understanding who we are.
Mm.
Who, what made us the way we are,
Yeah.
and what openings allow us to grow into something else.
Yeah. And by reading the history and reading the stories of those that you can get some kind of an idea what they did and what can, what we can do along the same lines to I'll even say leave a legacy of what we can do to create a better life for ourselves and just, pass it on through the generations.
Yeah, I think honestly, Kevin, we've barely scratched the surface of this. Because understanding, as I say, the worldview opened my mind to what the medieval mind had, what treasures they had in terms of their understanding of symbols, of stories, of our our path, our human path. I think
Hmm.
there's a way of thinking about who we are and how we should live that we have lost, and it's, not necessarily Christian based. I think
Hmm.
that's who they were, but older ways of thinking persisted and were powerful. We haven't even begun to talk about their view of other intelligences in the world,
Yeah.
which and of the gods and spirits and powers that overlap with our world, of
Yeah.
how other species interact with us and perceive the world in ways that are simply not physically possible for us, but is as valid as anything we experience.
It's like
There's
it's
much
like
to talk about. Maybe I should
it's
write a book about it.
well, no, it's that I think what I'm hearing is trying to make a connection with the world around us, not seeing ourselves above it, below it, but be on equal par with the world around us and what we can do to involve ourselves and grow from that. It can be something as simple as going out and sitting beside a tree or sitting at the foot of the tree and just taking in all the energy of that tree around us and what can we learn, what magic can we get from that tree. I just I've done it often. I try to do it every day, just connect with the natural world. And it has so much to give us. And when we look at the medieval time period, they did it as second nature, and we have to work at it, don't we?
Well, we do. And that's because we have grown up with stories telling us that we can't. The whole narrative of contemporary Western culture is that this is a material world, and so there's nothing to be seen there. But if we can become more aware of stories we aren't aware of, but which shape our thinking and loosen their hold-ups, we have to have stories to interpret the world. It's the only way that we can survive. But if we know what they're letting us do and we know what they're not letting us do, we can become open to the fact that there are other stories, or that our stories may have things we haven't encountered yet. But to the medieval mind, everything was connected.
Yeah.
And everything had its voice and its way of communicating, which modern science is now finding out. If you've done any reading at all about the intelligence of trees, or about the communication between different species of tree and the root networks that support each other, there's different forms of intelligence, different forms of awareness, all of which are valid, all of which are happening around us if we were only willing to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way to let it move through us, and that we can be a part of it and it can be a part of us. So, Emlyn, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I appreciate the work that you're doing so much, and I would encourage you. You said that you might have that you're working on maybe putting all this information together in a book, and I would hope you'd keep us in line for that and keep us aware of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I hope I haven't been rambling on too broadly or disconnectedly. I hope there's something here that will make your listeners think, "Oh, that's interesting. Let's find out more about that." Because I mean, one of the things we do as druids, we have trees, but we also are committed to learning, and to increasing the breadth and depth of our knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you, Emlyn. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's our magical show for this week. I do hope you enjoyed it, and my chat with Emlyn Phillips. For more information about Emlyn, his work, his writings, books, visit triathiad.com or triathiadsubstack.com. As always, a very special thanks to you, dear listener, for tuning in. And I might add, for information on Emlyn, revert back to that for a moment and just remind you that the information is there in the show notes, too, to connect with him. And you really want to do that. Remember, if you're seeking insights and advice on how to create the better life for yourself, and if you'd like to dive into some self-care, self-development, experience hypnotherapy, distant shamanic work, or Reiki, drop me a line, kevin@towardaBetterLife.com, for your free discovery call. On the website, you'll be able to click right on it and connect with me, and we'll set up that time. In the discovery call, we can discuss your goals, set some plans for achieving them, and move forward with your journey toward a better life. You can also visit my website, towardaBetterLife.com, for past episodes, blog entries, ways to enhance your spiritual journey, and upcoming events. Please subscribe and follow to Toward a Better Life through your favorite podcast platform, and do leave a review if you would on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, whatever your podcast platform may be. And this helps to spread the word about the program. As always, if you'd like to share your story, your music, your prose, your passion, or if you want to be my guest, write to me, kevin@towardaBetterLife.com. Until next week, enjoy your magical mysteries toward a better life.